All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So this is the current iteration of Bullszat, and if you'd like to see a very good deck tech done by my good friend Brian Weissman, I recommend that you check it out on his channel, which I believe I have linked to in my channel, or you can search for it. But if you're going to search your YouTube for it, just be aware that he has two channels. He has a Brian Weissman channel, which is about his one of his other passions, which is disc golf, and he has the Brian Weissman, which is a reference to the deck, I think. And the Brian Weissman is the channel that you want for Magic content, primarily Magic content, and that has his deck tech on it, which covers all the changes to his deck, with one small exception. I think in there he was getting ready to do the deck tech and didn't have a snow-covered swamp on hand, so he had to put in two basic swamps when he did the deck tech. But if you look at his deck tech, you'll see two basic swamps, but one should be snow covered, and he's fully aware of that. It's the reason is Tainted Pact, but for the purpose of the deck tech, I mean, in terms of how the deck functions, it doesn't really change anything, and the chances of actually hitting two swamps is pretty close to zero. But you want to make it actually zero, you just transform it into a snow swamp. So having said all that, this is the current version of the deck, and it is exceptionally good at winning in the 1v1 space, and a lot of fun to play. And one of the things that makes this deck so fun is it doesn't necessarily have a weakness like some decks will. It doesn't have like a singular card or effect that the deck can't beat. It's not like if you play a moat, suddenly my whole ground game goes away, and then I have no game plan. Or if you suddenly shut off like 10JUL2024, well, how will I accumulate cards and win? It has tons of card advantage, tons of ways to deal with most permanents that can be problematic. Like, oh no, you got a Stony Silence in play. That's a major problem for me. But maybe if I have like Feed the Swarm or a Vampiric Tutor to go get it, or I have myself a Chaos Defiler, or I have something like that, I might be able to work my way through it. Or on occasion, you might have like something like that in play against this deck, and I simply have a draw with extra mana. I've got basically enough lands to operate and some rituals for acceleration, and I just kind of work around it as if the card wasn't even there. That happens too sometimes. Other times you get the stack in a really tough bind, and it's pretty clear that you're going to win, and then all of a sudden you get hit by Lelia plus Tainted Pact, which will instantly kill you if you're unable to block it and stop it. And sometimes you can't know that that's the problem because Lelia has haste. And other times Rog attacks, and it's like you get that sinking feeling, and then realize you're going to take 21 points of commander damage from the card Hatred. So there's a lot of things that this deck can do that will pull a win out from a loss, as well as ways that it can quickly win. And so all around, it makes it a really good deck for somebody that's interested in having a variety of games, of the most powerful games and some of the fastest games. Fast to develop, fast to disrupt, fast to win, right? So I have been asked by one of the fans of the channel if I could touch on a decades-old deck of mine, one of the ones that used to be the main feature of this channel for a long time, which was Breya. I went ahead and tried to do that out of respect for the request and appreciation for the support that the person was showing. I don't know that I've done the best job of it, but like I said, I've been dealing with some medical stuff, so I honestly can't pour myself into a new project correctly like that. And at this point, Breya is so old that it's new again. But one thing I will say is that I will touch on that a little bit at the end of this video, and I'll kind of explain why I honestly don't think it's the best idea to play that deck, and I'll cover that. But for somebody that wants to, I'll kind of show you where I'm at with it, and we can talk a little bit about that at the end. I do have an excellent game. I'm about to run you through a series of games with this deck, and I have a very excellent one. The best, I think, one of the best is at the end that I think you'll really enjoy. So stay tuned for that, and we will go ahead and get started. I guess for those asking for an updated deck list, I simply don't have the energy to go into like Mox Field and start typing 100 cards in there. Maybe someone who is watching this in like 1024 can pause it, and this is the way I usually do it. I just pause and then I build the deck based on the screenshot. If somebody's willing to do that and put it into a place like Mox Field or any of the other deck building websites, that would be greatly appreciated. Please throw the link in the comments section if you do that, and then let's all rate them up and say thank you to that person if that happens. But in the meantime, I am not, as I said, going to go through the changes, because you can get the full deck list from the Brian Weissman's channel and his recent video on it. Let's just check out some games. All right. So this is today. I played these games here. It's kind of a fairly typical. Unfortunately, somebody's weed eating outside, so hopefully it's not too noisy. This is a fairly typical set of results for this deck. This deck is not unbeatable, and it doesn't fail to lose all of the time, despite Brian's extremely good track record and my recent record from today. Don't expect to play this deck with the idea that nobody can beat you. Every deck in Magic is beatable. There's no such thing as a 100% win rate deck. All there is a deck that's like, there are S tier decks, right? There's A tier decks, B tier, and so forth. This is an S tier deck, right? This is tier 0, we used to call it. This is basically a deck that if you're going to face it in 1v1, you are generally speaking concerned that you could lose, because even if you bring the best deck, some decks are very well positioned to match with it. So like the two greatest threats to this deck, I would say, are Grixis combo, and that's because this deck tends to attack your mana sources in hand, but a Grixis combo deck can win with only 2 lands in play and 0 cards in hand. It can just literally top deck a singular card, Underworld Breach, play Breach, play a Lion's Eye Diamond out of the graveyard, cast the card that Storm that mills themselves, and then they can actually mill their whole deck and then play a Thassa's Oracle from the graveyard. So a deck like that, a deck that can have 2 lands in play and 0 cards in hand, right, where I've mind twisted every single card and wastelanded them down to just 2 mana, can top deck an instant kill card. And I don't play counterspells, right? I don't. There's kind of close to sort of maybe counterspells and Flurry of Duplication and Deflecting Swat, but that's it. And I can't stop a card like that. And yes, I could run some anti-graveyard hate for that scenario, but I'm not gonna dilute my deck against the general field with an effect that I don't need in like 99% of the cases, just to account for something that only helps me in 1% of the case if I happen to have that card at exactly the right time. Otherwise doesn't do anything anyway. So I'm not gonna do that to myself. And so that is an example of a deck that can win. It can also top deck like Wheel of Fortune and Time Twister. It can also just get 3 mana and do the Thassa's Oracle Mnemonic Consultation. So there's a lot of nasty things that a deck like that can do against this deck. But having said all that, having covered all the ways that that deck can win others, that deck never wants to face this deck. And it's like, well, if that deck can beat this deck, why doesn't it want to face it? Well, it doesn't want to face it because while it can beat this deck, if you play a number of games against in the mirror, what happens frequently is that this deck completely destroys their resources. Like imagine that scenario where they have 2 mana and no other cards in hand, and they don't top deck Underworld Breach, right? In that case, what are the odds? Like, let's say they have 70 cards left in the deck. 1 in 70? Like, do you really want to be the deck that has a 1 in 70 chance to win? Or do you want to be the deck that's putting you in that position and forcing you to top deck the win, right? So I'm not saying this deck necessarily beats that deck or that that one necessarily beats this one, but what I'm saying is that that deck is one of the decks that pairs up well, like if you want to try to get wins against this deck, and even then it doesn't want to face this deck. And along the same lines, the other deck that pairs up very well against this deck is Minsc and Boo. And that's because the commander is very good at killing 10JUL2024. This deck has developed since the last time I played against Minsc and Boo, and I actually don't know what that match looks like and what the win rate is, but I suspect that this deck is a lot better at beating Minsc and Boo now than it was in the past, but I never see anybody playing that anymore online. I'm pretty sure that it just kind of fell out of favor, maybe because it's a very linear deck and it frankly is a little bit boring to play. Maybe it feels like an easy button. Maybe people got pissed at facing it. I really don't know what the reason is. I know I was pretty frustrated and tired of facing like Minsc and Boo. Pretty much like at one point, I think it was all I faced for months. Like I would log in, immediately face Minsc and Boo, log out. I was just like totally over it, not interested. Having built the deck myself and played it and knowing what the play pattern was like. But having said all that, the tech in this deck has evolved since then. This was like half a year ago or maybe 9 months ago, maybe a full year ago. It was a while back. And I don't know what that matchup would look like. I wouldn't mind facing it again just to kind of get a feel for it. I have a feeling that for the most part it would generally be the same, but I think that there's maybe one or two kind of key differences in how that matchup would play out, and that's basically one of the main things is this singular card hatred, where a lot of times with this deck you can get way behind, you can't contain your opponent, and then you just hatred kill them out of nowhere and the game ends. So that may be one of the ways that you handle that deck with this deck, for example. There could be some other things that affect the match as well, so things like Chaos Defiler, and I mean these are kind of top end cards, but there are potentially good cards in that matchup. We've picked up Molten Collapse, which is a new one, and some other things. So I honestly don't know, but my point is, no matter what you bring against this deck, even if you're like, hey, I got a early Stony Silence or something, right? Not only does this deck have solutions to that, Feed the Swarm, Chaos Defiler, and so forth, but it also has scenarios where you can just win despite the handicap. So you can have have one arm tied behind your back in a boxing match and still win. You know, it's kind of like if I was going to have a boxing match with Mike Tyson and he tied one arm behind his back, you probably 100% bet on Mike Tyson. One-armed Mike Tyson will still kick my ass. Like, that's just kind of how it is. And so in a lot of cases, people bring these decks that are trying to hate on this deck, I notice. And while they do sometimes get wins, like everything lines up, I have a hand of I keep a hand with land, 6 artifacts that ramp me. My opponent goes first turn, land, Mox Diamond, Stony Silence, and I just concede. The game's literally over. I don't even need to take my first turn, right? I'm dead. That does happen. But for all the games that happens, do you want to bank on that, or is that more like a once in a blue moon kind of lucky thing? And that typically what I've found is that's very atypical, right? This is in a format where you have 60 cards and 4 copies of everything, and you can run 8 cantrips to go find your silver bullets, and your opponent's deck is super linear and has no solutions. That's just not the format we're in. Excuse me. So in this format, thinking that that's going to be a solution is not necessarily it. The best way to beat this deck is, if you are going to have to face it, would be to play either something that can combo off or has a lot of power, like the 2 examples I gave, and also has a game plan when your primary game plan doesn't work, can be disruptive. Like the Minsc and Boo deck has a ton of mana destruction, and the and the Grixis combo deck has tons of counter magic and card drawing, right? So if you can have a game plan that involves card drawing, mana production, like the exact things that Magic's really generally about, card drawing, mana production, and disruption, plus a fast game plan, then you've got a deck that can compete with this one. That's what you need. You need all 4 elements to consistently compete with this one. To get one-offs, then you could show up with anything. I mean, if I get a bad enough draw, you get a good enough draw, if the stars align, you're going to get a win. But as you can see, on average, that's probably not going to happen. But it can. So anyway, as I said, the 4 pillars, mana production, card advantage, some sort of quick way to win, and cheap ways to disrupt your opponent. Those 4 things are always what makes the best deck, and that's what this deck is. It's literally those 4 things in almost its purest form. Like if there was an elemental of Magic principles, this deck definitely seems to represent that. But enough talk on that, and don't forget I'm going to do the Breya discussion after the videos. But let's run through the Bullszat games first. I'm having a little trouble sitting up, as I think I mentioned in my last video. So if I have to cut this short, I will, but I'm hopefully going to get all the way through it, and then that'll be my one investment of energy for the day. All right, so anyway, I remember what the last match is, but last game, but I don't remember the rest of these. So looks like Itzinger here is playing Carador, which is an interesting one in the sense that I haven't seen this. This is a blast from the past. I haven't seen this in a really long time. And yeah, I've got a good keep with speed and disruption, so we will run through it. And I told my opponent, I was playing like Breya, and I got frustrated, and this was just, and I said I'm going to swap to my stronger deck, and my opponent says, oh joy. So I mean, it wasn't like Breya was a total pushover, but it's just not that good. All right, I go ahead and print by force there because I've got K command in my hand here, and so I'm going to be able to cover an artifact if it comes down. And if my opponent does something like Soul Ring into Arcane Signet, I'm going to go Blackleaf Cliffs, Kolaghan's Command, sack Rog, Flare of Disruption, and I'm going to make him discard 2 cards and destroy 2 artifacts. But here my opponent mulliganed a bunch of times, and then I had a Rishadan Port, and he says, I can't. He doesn't have any land. So that just ends up being that, unfortunately. And so we move on, and now I'm playing against Coverguard. And that was just after midnight when that happened, if you look at the timestamps. And that's why the Breya one doesn't show up. But let's go ahead and take a look, because I switched over first thing right after midnight. My sleep schedule's been so wildly off because of the medications I'm taking, and they knock me out for hours, and then I wake up, nobody's up and stuff, and I've got the laptop by my bed, and sometimes I'll get a few games in while I'm dealing with that. So anyway, Coverguard here is playing Celestial Kirin, which is it's an interesting mono white card, but I don't think it's really as good as I certainly wouldn't play it. It's essentially a very bad Breya is what it is, because Breya is very good at killing things, but not good at providing card advantage or mana, and that's what that Celestial Kirin is. It's good at killing things, doesn't provide card advantage or mana, and it's in one color, so you don't even get the benefit of like playing with Force of Will and such. So my opponent's got, I don't know. They've got to start with this very interesting card here. I was looking at it. It looks pretty interesting in the sense that when it dies, you manifest. So if you can get a bunch of counters on it, you could potentially get a lot of creatures. But I have a solution to this card if I need to. Because what I can do is, not only can I chump block it, but let's say my opponent invested, somehow found a way to put a bunch of counters on it so that if I killed it, it would manifest a bunch of cards and then have a big threat. I would just Liquid Metal Torque and then cast into the fire to exile this thing instead, and essentially Swords to Plowshares it at that point would take care of it and not trigger the if it dies clause. So my opponent would need to put counters on it and have a sacrifice mechanism in their Celestial Cairn deck. Not really happening. And with Lotus, despite the fact that I missed a land, I got my commander out very quickly and win the game. And so Cover Guard jumps into another one with me. I'm going to try to move my mouse so I'm not shaking the camera. I don't know if that's disturbing anybody watching. And again, Cover Guard is playing this Celestial Cairn. And once again, I have a very quick start. And look at almost the same cards. Look, I have Flare, Cast into the Fire. I just add those cards, right? It's funny that they show up again. So I'm going to lead off with Crypt Mire so that I can destroy a Soul Ring on turn 1 if I need to. Opponent has a land tax here. They only have still have 6 cards in hand, so I think about it and decide that I'm not going to let that slow me down. They can go ahead and get their cards now, but what are they going to do with them, right? Draw to 10, discard. It's not that big of a deal. Opponent plays a White Orchid. I'm going to pause. A White Orchid Phantom. This is a pretty nice card. When it comes into play, destroy up to 1 target non-basic land. Its controller search your library for basic and put it in play tapped and shuffle. This card is usually used the way that my opponent did it, like to kill my Ancient Tomb here. But actually, what I've actually seen this card used for, and what it's primarily used for in other formats, is use it on indestructible lands or a land like Flagstones of Tricaire, your own lands. And so use it as white mana ramp, which is really pretty interesting. It's also 2 mana for a 2/2 flying first strike. So White Knight, how far you have come. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and Bullszat's going to do Bullszat things, and my opponent concedes here, but actually I think I slammed the ready Springleaf Drum, Broadside Bombardier, swing, kill your White Orchid Plume, and then my opponent actually conceded, but we didn't get to see it because it's already over. Occasionally when my opponent concedes, you don't see the end of the game in the replay. It just registers weirdly. So anyway, Blackagar Boltagon is playing Urza. This is one of the stronger opponents that you can face online, I've noticed. But I win the roll and I've got a fantastic start here. Another opening hand with Flare, interestingly enough. Seems to make its way into my hand quite a bit. Opponent runs out a turn 1 Urza into Soul Ring, which is pretty scary stuff. I top deck it by 4, so let's go ahead and grab a couple of treasures. Nope, can't block there. He forgot for a second. We'll go ahead and buy 4 set. If my opponent tried to counter it, then I would flare it and copy it and target the same stuff. Instead, my opponent plays an Urza Saga, but now they're down mana. They don't have their guy. I wasteland them, Signet. This becomes almost trivial at this point, right? We're going to Broadside Bombardier away the Urza, and the game is over very fast. These cards like Bombardiers and Lelia and whatnot are part of the reason why I think this deck's a little bit stronger than it used to be against Lotus starts and Planeswalkers and stuff, things that I can attack and kill very, very quickly and easily. But of course, when you have a Mox into Guild Artisan going first and your opponent can't deal with it, almost any game seems pretty easy from that position. Alright, Snowball the Dog is the next opponent. Oh, I'm hurting. Okay, and they're playing Aragorn, King of Gondor, so taking the Monarch. Very interesting. And I've got a very old school like Crucible strip lock hand, so we're gonna go ahead and see what we can do with that. I'm gonna go ahead and wasteland my opponent because they had a first turn play that, and then my opponent's just off it. They just like don't play a land on their second turn and concede. I don't fully understand why, but obviously if they had played a land here, I wasteland it and then cast Rakdos Signet off these two. And then on the next turn, I use these two plus the Signet to play the Crucible and then strip mine them again. So they were dead, but they conceded before I could actually demonstrate that they were locked out, unfortunately. You know, it's kind of fun to do those things, but hey, I'm good with it. I totally get it. And then Cover Guard shows up with a more competitive commander, Yasova Dragonclaw. It's a green commander with a blue and red activation, this blue-red hybrid symbol, which means that my opponent's playing those three colors. In the meantime, I've got a pretty solid hand that's missing a single mana or artifact to turn on my Mox Opal, but it's probably too good. Yeah, going second, too good to mulligan. And I draw a Rollick, so we'll go ahead and disrupt that halfling there. And I'm just going to play this stuff out in case my opponent's playing a Wheel of Fortune or Time Twister deck. It does risk something like my opponent killing me with my opponent playing like a multiple artifact removal spell, like a Force of Vigor would be a problem for me here. But my opponent, I don't know if they weren't paying too close of attention here, if this looked like I had 5 mana to them, but they just concede before making me prove that I have actually got enough mana for my commander. So it does come back later though, so we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I've got to run against somebody named Lost in Thought, who I think was interested in, you know, sometimes people like to play and see, you know, kind of like see if they can get the win, see if it's a fluke. They just like to challenge themselves. You know, there's lots of reasons why people like to do that, and I'm totally cool with it. Obviously, I have a great hand here, but my opponent is going first. They're playing Edgar Markov. A lot of old commanders showing up all of a sudden today. Don't know why, but they have a great start. First turn land Mox Signet is a heck of a good start. All I've got is this Torque into Rakdos Signet here. I'm going to play the land. Doesn't kill my mana, which is great. I'm going to play a Curse of Opulence, swing in, play a Skull Clamp, Inquisition my opponent, Thoughtseize my opponent, and call it good. And at this point, what I've left them with is Diabolic Intent, which I took from the... I Inquisitioned away Bloodline Keeper. I took Diabolic Intent, and I saw that they had these, and They Shall Know No Fear. But my opponent top-decked Drana and Linvala off the top. So looks like sort of a combo card, but it is also a vampire. So we'll see. But I just have to basically keep in mind that he can make his creatures indestructible as we continue with this game. It played out a little bit quicker than I would have liked. All right, so I've got a land here. I'm just going to play my commander. We're going to make some guys, and I'm going to pass for the turn. And why don't I sack this and draw 3 cards and whatnot? Well, these actually represent more cards off Skull Clamp, 1. And 2, I'm holding Flare, so I'd rather keep my my Fork for 0 mana up in case I need it, 2. And 3, I have Curse of Opulence, and it's easier to attack with something that has Menace than it is to attack with one of these. Like if they leave just 1 vampire token back, I want to swing with this and get another mana source next turn. So those are the 3 reasons why I didn't just sack it and draw cards immediately. And of course, I'm not anticipating my opponent killing my commander, because even if they gave his creatures +1/+0 and indestructible, and I chose not to block, this would hit for 4, +2 is 5. It wouldn't actually kill my commander. So on their turn, they play Mavrin, Fane Dusk Apostle. So whenever one or more non-token vampires attack, they get a 1/1 vampire with lifelink, and it itself is a 2/2. Alright, so that means when this thing attacks, basically. So they swing in. They don't make this play yet, so they're still holding that. But they do hit my commander down to 2. Okay, but at this point, it's already created, because of Skull Clamp, 2, 4, 6, 8 cards for me, potentially, right? So let's start drawing some cards. Let's get to clamping. Alright, there's a Swat, Spree, a Necro. Alright, let's go ahead and pop some of my opponent's mana, play some mana of my own, and pass. Commander is almost certainly dead here. So they swing in, and yep, he's dead. Alright, so we'll let that go. For now, right? It's a commander. Okay, so now we're going to turn that big thing into an artifact, make them sacrifice an artifact, so then they have to sacrifice that. Let's clamp the last remaining card here. Go ahead and do a little fetching, and we're going to get Necro into play. Here we go. I'll pick up a few more cards. And I can attack and grab myself a gold token. And so I have Necro going. I don't have my commander. They can pressure my life total a little bit, but that's it. Rollick is nice because I can take out that thing that's making lifelink tokens. So let's go ahead and do that now, as soon as he enters combat, before he attacks. Opponent then attacks for 4. I could have, of course, forked it with Flare of Duplication, but I'm not gonna waste a flare on copying that spell over. And I'm perfectly content to sit with a redirection and a fork, both of which cost 0, because I have this guy in play, and just not worry too much about that. My opponent can attack for 4 here. What is 4 damage against the Necropotence? And of course they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're mana short of this. They can, buff their guys, but again, they could only do 8 tops. I'm going to swing back, and I get to Lelia them. I get to Dark Confidant them. I can clamp. It's definitely over, and my opponent realizes that and goes ahead and scoops it up and just moves on to the next game. Okay. I'm really struggling here. And then brings their Go Shintai Light of Life's Origin deck, which pretty much doesn't have, it doesn't really have a ton of value. It's a Shrine commander, and but it's 5 colors. It basically allows my opponent to play 5 colors. And my opponent, I go ahead and mulligan to 6. My opponent mulligans to 6. I decide to keep my hand. My opponent decides to keep their hand. And I win the die roll. So. Alright, so they lead with the Sapara's headquarters. I'm going to go ahead and put in a tapped Blood Crypt and untap it. And then for my turn, play Call of the Ring. So we can start getting some cards going. It would be nice to wasteland their tri-land here, and I certainly will go after it as soon as I can. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and draw some cards. Oh, wait. No. Second. I have a different plan. How about Swamp Dark Ritual, Hatred, kill you? And that's the end of that game. We move on to the next one. Gross. Alright. Lost in Thought joins me for a third game. And perfect example there of one of the things that makes this deck so deadly is that sure, I had a card advantage engine online, but then instantly my opponent just dies, right? This is definitely a keep. So, and I win the roll again, so we're going to lead off with an Imperial Seal off of a Springleaf Drum. Opponent plays Tundra for the turn. I went and got a Mana Crypt into Grim, into Tevish, into drawing cards, and I hit my land drop. I'll pass. I've got Swat Up, Guild Artisan. I drew off of that. My opponent ETs for Aura Shards instead of Mana Crypt. That is very ambitious against this deck. My opponent gets a lifelink 2/2 creature that makes their enchantments cost less mana, so it'll be easier for them to play that. I kind of understand why they did it, but I don't agree with it. You need mana in the beginning of the game, not future disruption. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and kill their guy and port them down. So they need 1 more mana so that they can play that Aura Shards. That's all they need, just 1 more. I'm going to play a Guild Artisan here and then swing in and get a couple more tokens. You notice I snuck my commander back down. Draw some cards. Let's go ahead and Dust Bowl them. Let's go ahead and port them. Now they're actually still stuck on 2 mana and can't play their Aura Shards, and then they finally concede. And never get to actually play the card that they tutored for. So that is a clear sign that it was the wrong tutor target. Of course, you could say, well, there's no way I could have known that. That is true, but But it doesn't change the fact that it was the wrong target. It just means you couldn't have known that. However, having said that, my advice is if you're going to tutor early, you almost always should be going to get mana. If you notice, I don't go first turn Vampiric Tutor, go get Necropotence, turn 2 play a land, turn 3 play a land, play Necropotence. You'll almost never see me do that. It's going to be first turn, go get fast mana, right? You want to use your tutors to get ahead. Otherwise, especially cards like Enlightened Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Mystical Tutor, and so forth, because they actually are minus card advantage. So if you're going down in card advantage, you need to go up in speed and hopefully leverage that speed to get card advantage going, like this deck does with its commander, or like here if I tutored up like a Dark Ritual for a Necropotence, for example, something like that. And so, although technically I would get Mana Crypt yet again and then just play land, Vamp, land, Talisman, Necro. That would be the way to do that. But anyway, if Rag was a Vamp, for example. But my point is, if you're going to go down in card advantage with a card like Enlightened Tutor and so forth, you have to make up for that by going up in card advantage some other way. And usually the way to do that is to get enough mana advantage that you can play your top end spells faster. You can also make up for the card advantage with tempo in the same way that this deck sometimes just kills the opponent with like a card like Hatred or something along those lines. You can do the same thing by just getting ahead and beating them down really quickly or something along those lines. But anyway, having said all that, opponent finally joins me with a Rurik Thar the Unbowed. If you're going to play these two colors, if you're going to play Gruul, you should be playing Minsc and Boo. I hate to say it because I hate the deck, but that is the correct answer, not Rurik Thar. That card is 6 mana dog shit, basically. Pardon my language. Not trying to bang on this opponent again. Try anything, right? Again, maybe I'm wrong about some stuff, but I'm not, because this card costs 6 mana and doesn't win the game. What this card does at 6 mana is starts to maybe it deals some damage to your opponent if they play into it and can't answer it. It doesn't even get you card advantage or mana ramp or anything. So in this format, 6 mana needs to win the game. And basically, that's been true for Magic for forever. A card like Mirror Universe, it needs to be 6 mana win the game. Anyway, for my opponent's turn, and this certainly doesn't do that, they go Ancient Tomb, Signet, Root Maze. So Root Maze causes all artifacts and lands to enter the battlefield tapped. It's very punishing for fetch lands. Fortunately, this deck has as many fetch lands as it can play, but I don't have a fetch land hand, so it's going to punish me. It's going to slow me down, but it's not the worst thing in the world here, especially with a Ragavan running. So I hit them and find a forest and just play a tapped City of Brass. My opponent plays a tapped Mana Vault. This incidentally is not a combo. I'm sure that they had Mana Vault. They drew Mana Vault, but that's just like atrocious to see that. It just bothers me. Anyway, now we're exiling cards off my deck and their deck. Meanwhile, my opponent spends their turn untapping Mana Vault, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and slam a Necropotence here. Why am I necroing? Oh, right, because I'm going to kill them. This is one of the other combos. I didn't cover this in the deck, not deck tech, but so on this turn I play Necropotence. I have Lelia in play, so I am now necroing for 24, I think, something like that. And then wait for it. Necropotence, if you aren't fully aware of how the card works, exiles the top card of your library before it puts them in your hand. Lelia triggers whenever a card is exiled from your graveyard or library. And so what that means is that Lelia, I just cast Hatred on Lelia, except it's +1/+1 counters and it's also permanent. I also get to draw them many cards, essentially, if my opponent were to somehow live through the turn, which they clearly will not. And swing. So Lelia on her own just deals 29 there and 30 there. I overdid it a little bit. and my opponent dies. So that's one of the other combos. Also, if, let's say, somehow my opponent was at, like, I don't know, 60 here, and so didn't have enough life to kill them, well, then I would end my turn, right, and these 27 cards that I necroed would go into my hand, and then I'd have to discard down to 7, and the necro says whenever you discard a card, you exile it. And so I would exile all those cards, I would keep the perfect 7 and exile all the rest, which would then trigger Lelia again, and it would become a 50-50, for the next turn. So that is also a combo with this, as well as this triggers off of Yawgmoth's Will. Lelia triggers off of a lot in this deck, and makes this deck very gross. So I don't know if you saw that kill coming, but even in reviewing the game, I saw it as I was playing, but I didn't see the kill that I was about to enact until just now. It even caught me off guard, but that's something to keep in mind. Luckily, I was on it when I was playing, and so that's something to keep in mind that you can do as a combo kill. All right, so let's move on to Cover Guard comes back this time, playing Yasova again, and I've got a smoking strong hand, so we're going to keep. I'm going second this time. All right, Mox Opal, not. I'm going to go ahead and play this and just kind of hide the Lotus. If they want to kill the Opal, it's a great use of their time. I don't mind at all. I play a Nature's Lore and go get a Taiga and then play a Skull Clamp. So I'm very happy to see this, because unless it's a Force of Will or a Daze, I'm all set here. Let's go ahead and get the commander down. And it sticks. Excellent. Make some guys and pass. Opponent plays their commander and clamps it, and then I'm going to do something really cool here. So we're going to draw, fetch some mana, and I want to deal with this, but I don't want. They only have 4 cards in hand. They have a lot of mana, but I don't want to give my opponent cards if I can help it. So I need to, like, Shattering Spree this, but then it won't be a 5/1, so I can't cast Into the Fire to kill it. So what I could do is Shattering Spree it, and then Phyrexian Tower like a Bombardier's to kill it, or like a K-Command to kill it. But instead what I'm going to do is actually a little bit cleaner. Boom. K-Command targeting the artifact and the creature. It kills them both at the same time. And since Skull Clamp is in the graveyard, when the creature hits the graveyard as well, as part of the resolution, it never actually triggers. Alright, so we can continue now. So threat averted, basically. Opponent just replays their commander. And then, of course, well, I was going to deal with it, but I drew this card. So how about if we just win the game? Boop, dead. All right. Next is Linky. I don't know what Linky is playing here. It's interesting to see all the new names showing up online, given that I haven't played in so long. My opponent's playing Braids. So this is not the 4-mana Braids. This is a 3-mana Braids, where you sack a permanent on your turn at the beginning of your end step, and then your opponent has to match you. If they don't, you draw a card and they lose 2 life. So, like, if he sacks a land, I've got to sack a land, and so forth. Otherwise he draws and I lose 2 life. I don't have to do it, but if I want to prevent him from getting access to the cards. Cards that give your opponent a choice are generally not good. So while this card, actually that's a pretty decent effect, it's not actually a good commander. I have, of course, a ridiculous hand here, so we're just going to lead off with Rog and Volt. And then I am not going to go for, like, the Hatred kill here. I'm going to go for the safer play. I'm going to play Signet into Confidant going first. That gets me extra mana for the next turn, and hopefully extra cards to find the mana that I need. Alright, so let's see what Confidant can find. I can Hatred kill later. I'll get around to it, right? Death Cloud and a Saga. So if I hadn't made that play, I would have missed my land drop this turn, and then I wouldn't be able to make this play. It was just much better to do it this way. Alright, let's send in the crew and exile a Thran Dynamo, okay? So now my opponent's under a lot of pressure already, and I'm already getting tons of card advantage, and of course we've got Saga ticking up. Alright. No hit on lands here, but maybe Lelia can find one. It does not. Find some removal that I a little bit redundant now. So I'll just sit on K command, and if I don't need to play it, then I'll activate Urza's Saga and make a big old robot. Alright, so they play a card that's not particularly threatening, so I'm going to go ahead and make the robot. And then for my turn, we'll go ahead and draw off of Confidant, draw for the turn. Go ahead and tap Saga for some mana, grab ourselves a Soul Ring, play a land, play a Chrome Mox, imprint that guy, and then, well, do the thing. Hatred, kill my opponent, slap a Winter Orb in there just for funsies, and be done with it. And I draw a Flare. I guess this was, now I'm going to, you know, mea culpa on this. This was poor play, right? What I needed to do there, floating the mana was okay, I suppose. If I was certain I was going to play the Winter Orb, I could have played the Winter Orb. But I should have swung and then cast Hatred. Of course, if I had, Lilia revealed Flare, so I could have swung, and then if my opponent had, I could have cast Hatred and then flared it. Like, I could have attacked with all of these guys, waited for blocks. My opponent would have blocked whatever or not. And then I could have cast Hatred targeting, like, Rogao, and then sacked Lilia and flared it over to the construct, and probably still killed my opponent regardless, more than likely. Or if, like, I targeted Rogao and then they had a removal spell, I sack Rogao and then flared over to the construct, and then, you know, I assume if I would have sent in the Confidant, they would have attacked with the Confidant. And since I didn't know I was getting the Flare, I would have not done that. But yeah, I would have attacked for 11 here. 11 plus 21 is so if you take the 9 life here away, I guess I would have had to pay a little bit more life to actually ensure that that was a kill. So it's just an interesting play I could have made, but it didn't matter. I mean, obviously I had the removal, I had the win. So we move on to Claws Van Glyph. And if you notice with Hatred, this deck wins with that card a lot, or Lelia. Those are the two primary win conditions in this deck. And if you remember from watching the deck play in the past, what you would have recalled is that the primary win condition would be something like Winter Orb and Death Cloud, getting your opponent to concede, or Death Cloud just making an impossible game. Or something like Mind Twist and Death Cloud, something along those lines. Like, the win con was putting your opponent in an unwinnable position. We didn't actually kill them, typically, till much, much later. But we just got them into a really bad spot. And as you can see, with the current iteration, the deck's got so many... it's got... it still has all the capabilities of doing that, but it's so much better at winning so quickly and truly winning, like as in just your opponent is dead on the spot, that it's honestly quite a bit better of a deck. So my opponent's playing a 5-color deck with Kenrith. Beautiful. I like the border, looks kind of cool, honestly. That I'm not a big fan of, I like old school borders, but I do think that looks pretty neat. Anyway, this is Kenrith. I've actually played with this commander a bit as a possible 5-color commander, as a control commander, simply because, you know, it can gain life, it can draw cards, it can reanimate things, it can get haste and trample in order to kill planeswalkers. It does like all the good stuff that you might want from a control commander in 5 colors. Maybe I'll return to it one day. It does have card drawing on it, so it's not like total garbage or anything. But it plays, you know, you can Lotus it out, which is the other thing, is that you can get it out quick, put some pressure on your opponent, maybe just kill him with commander damage very quickly. It would take 5 turns, but since you can put a counter on target creature, you can actually kill him in 4 turns with this. And because you can give it haste, you can actually make it 3 turns. So typically, you play this and smack them for like 5, smack them for 6, smack them for 6, and they're dead, because that's 21 commander damage-ish. You might have to put, I think my math is off. 1, 2. Oh, my math is off. But if you count the haste turn as, normally it would take 4 turns after you've played it, so 5 turns total. But if you count the haste turn, it actually subtracts 1. So I guess that's what I was going with my brain. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's still just a big creature, and it's a big creature against a deck like this. It's really good at removing, well, permanents from the board. My opponent has to mulligan to force, so Not exactly game to high step when I get the victory for, but I get an even better. I had a solid start. It was like acceptable. And then I get this Ragavan off the top, and it just becomes exceptional. All right, so we'll go ahead and hit them. And I see a Plains there, and I just pass. Opponent plays a Utopia Sprawl. So they've got 1, 2, 3, 4 mana, so I'm going to go ahead and kill that and attack their mana a little bit. Let's go ahead and kill that as well. I think that Feed the Swarm play was probably not great. I probably should have held it just to kill Kenrith, since I don't have a guaranteed way to do it. And if I had, I would have been able to kill that Dark Tutelage and my opponent just played off the top. I do fortunately hit one of their playable, a card of theirs that I can play, a Chromatic Lantern, so I'll go ahead and put that into play. Opponent gets an Incubation Druid for their turn, and then just decides to concede, I guess, because I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana, and I'm hitting them with a Ragavan, I suppose, is a reason to scoop. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I think that they were still potentially in it, but they come back with I can also understand conceding, even though from that position, given that they mulligan so hard. So now they're coming back with their Kenrith deck for another round. They mulligan to 5, so I'm not sure what's going on there with all the mulligans. Probably means a deck is either very unlucky or potentially just needs a little bit of work. But in the meantime, I just run out a ultra fast turn 1 Bullszat. And the reason I play it this way, super aggressive like that, is that my opponent did mulligan multiple times, so the chances that they have like a Force of Will, for example, are less. And then I go ahead and attack their mana base and pass for the turn. I'd love to get this Lelia going. I'd love to get this Dust Bowl going, but, you know, it'll require some more mana. They've got 3 cards in hand there. Let's see what we can do. I think I'm going to go ahead and play. So I play this Torque, I play a land, and I him away 2/3 of their hand. So leaving them with exactly 1 card in hand and 2 lands. So I really want to Dust Bowl my opponent, but now that I have the Godpharaoh statue, I have a more interesting proposition for them about to come. And my opponent draws, and I had hemmed away their last land, and they scoop. Of course, if they didn't, we go like Mount Doom. We don't play Urborg if we can help it against them until we're going to Dust Bowl them. Something like Mount Doom into Godpharaoh's statue, followed by Dust Bowl, and then we just start Dust Bowling them into nothing, and then we Lelia. I mean, obviously, like, it was super over at that point. All right, let's move on to Cobbled Hero. And Cobbled Hero is playing Kalidor. So it's Kalidor Hero. I've got to take a mulligan, so I mulligan into this hand here. And I'm going to slow play it. I'm not going to ramp out that Signet and then have to kill my City of Traders the very next turn. Hate playing Urborg against black decks. Always try not to do it if I can help it. But sometimes I can't help it. So, and this is one of those times. All right, we'll go ahead and get out some additional mana here. Still unclear how I'm going to get to my commander. I need to top deck some land or something. Meanwhile, my opponent plays a second land, doesn't do much. I have an Ancient Tomb here. This is wonderful for me. Let's go ahead and get a Lotus into Liliana. Make them sacrifice a creature. They do, and they use it to scry. This is fine with me. The Liliana is kind of bait, but it gives me the ability to start disrupting them a little bit further, and then I can follow up with some. I can reload my hand with the commander. All right. Let's go ahead and... it doesn't look like I have a target for Vandal Blast, plus I have a Chaos Defiler. And let's get my commander down and draw some cards and run out of Fable. Pass for the turn. Opponent plays Palantir of Orthonk and Esper Sentinel. I'm going to go ahead and pay life here. And mill off a Collector Oof. Happy to see that go. Alright, so I'm going to discard and then feed to Liliana a Tainted Pact. Swing in, and from here, I'm going to go and strip mine them. Yogg will blow that thing up, Liliana them, Tainted Pact, play a strip mine, make some guys, pass for the turn. Opponent does nothing. On my turn, I strip mine them, and I packed it into Duretti. I was a tiny pact. I just stopped as soon as I hit anything that was likely to be fairly decent, and yeah, that's the end of that game there. All right, so Kobold Hero joins me again for another one. And are they playing the same deck or not? I don't recall. Let's take a look. Yeah, same deck. And, you know, I've got a solid start. My opponent leads off with the turn 1 elf. Doesn't have to mulligan themselves to death, which is always nice for them. And I thought seize them, wasteland them, and I'm going to go ahead and pause. I thought seize them and see Temple of Silence, Urborg. This weird vampire, I don't know why people like this card so much. And this thing, I take from them a Safi Eric's Daughter, which can recur a creature and can be used as part of a combo. My opponent plays Temple of Silence, and of course I strip mine them. Keeps their card on top, and attacks me with an elf. I don't know why the replays are playing like turbo speed lately. Alright, so for my turn, I'm going to go ahead and just cast into the fire the Elvish Mystic and pass for the turn. And plays Urborg, which gives me another source of black, and oh man, off the top, there it is. Crucible, strip mine, go. My Opal's now on. I get a fabled passage. Sure. I'll just go ahead and play my commander and draw 3. And then replay Rog. And opponent fetches for the turn. But knowing that their hand is probably not too strong there, they get a Collector Oof out. I'm totally fine with all this. Alright, we'll go ahead and make some thralls. Just wasteland them. Strip mine them and strip mine them again. Play a Torque that I can't use. I just jump block here. No problem. Alright, I'm losing flips. My opponent's finally stopped playing lands, which is great. I'll go ahead and play Sulphurous Springs now. And jump again. And then for my turn, go ahead and play a land and draw some cards. Pass for the turn. I play the strip mine there, and the reason I played the strip mine there and I chump with my commander is I'm about to get my commander back. And the reason I play the strip mine there is I don't want to get Bojuka bogged, and I don't need to kill this Collector Oof just yet. I'll get to it, and we'll do that now with a Chaos Defiler. Boop. And we'll Tevish and play Duretti, and at this point the game is super over. One thing I want to point out with Chaos Defiler that you may not be aware of, somebody mentioned it in the comments from Brian's last video, something I've been aware of for a while, is that Chaos Defiler does not target. It does not say target. It just says choose, and it destroys the thing. It does not, and what that means is that if their card has Shroud or like protection from black or anything like that, you can just choose it because you're not targeting it, and then the Chaos Defiler effect will take place. Now, if it has like indestructible, then this won't kill it, right? Because it says destroy. It doesn't say like exile. But if it had protection from black, this would kill it because protection is det. D-E-B-T is damage, enchantment, blocking, and targeting. Those are the things that you can't do. But this doesn't damage, enchant, block, or target. It destroys. That's not what the D stands for in det for protection. And therefore, because you're not targeting, it's getting around that aspect, it can kill a pro-black creature. So keep that in mind, or pro-red, or an untargetable, or a shroud, or something like that. It kills something with ward, and you don't have to pay the cost because you're not targeting. So just keep that in mind as a solution if you face cards like that, but you can still deal with those using Chaos Defiler, which is really cool. All right, next is Pigpen XOXO. And Pigpen is playing what? Tana and Timna as a partner mechanic, and they Imperial Seal turn 1, which is an interesting, means their deck is probably a pretty serious thing. Unfortunately, my deck's a pretty serious thing, so we'll go ahead and get some guys out. We've got a Skull Clamp. Opponent plays a Soul Ring and an Arid Mesa and passes. Makes perfect sense. I'll draw some cards, play a Mox Amber, play a untapped Shatter Skull, the Smashing, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and pass. Alright, opponent fetches, gets down a Shieldred the Apocalypse, and plays Temple Garden. So whenever I draw a card, I'm going to lose 2 life. Alright, we'll go ahead and discard a couple cards here. We're digging for some mana, which I do find. And we'll go ahead and make some dorks here. Swing in for the last mana that I need, and Hatred kill him. Yep, that is a Shieldred, and you are shield dead. And that's it for Pigpen XOXO. And finally, the last game that I told you was a pretty good one here. I mean, all of these were pretty interesting, but this game against Colossum, this game was a nail-biter for me. One is playing Ragavan and going first, and I don't have any way to remove it, but I've got almost enough mana. I mean, any black source just sets his hand on fire, right? Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, like there's so many ways that this deck can Chrome Mox, right? Turn 1 a Tavish and then just have infinite blockers. I also have Rog to potentially block on turn 1, and then maybe I can get something going on turn 2. So based on all that, I'm going to go ahead and keep it. Opponent leads off with Rag. Alright, mana, no, that is the furthest thing from it. It's the second most expensive card in my deck. So I'll play Saga and pass. Opponent swings in. I'm going to take it here because I might want to play Calling the Weak, and my opponent exiles an Angerous Rampage and opts not to play it. My turn, this ticks up, and I draw a Deluge. It's still not mana. I play Lotus to avoid having to discard it, and he flashes out Disruptor Fruit. So now we know why I didn't play the Rampage. Naming Tevish Zot. So if you're not sure with how this card works, it's a new one. I've definitely considered it for this deck. It's pretty interesting. Flash Artifact. It says name a card. The spells with the chosen name cost 3 more to cast, and you also Pithing Needle those that card as well. So it would cost me 8 mana to get Tevish Zot into play, and then I couldn't use it. Is what we're looking at here. Meanwhile, my opponent puts Sticky Fingers, which is a great enchantment that I would play if I actually did much attacking, if I did enough attacking to warrant it. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to player, create a treasure token. When the enchanted creature dies, draw a card to replace Sticky Fingers, and it gives the creature menace. So, of course, that means I can't block. So my opponent gets 2 treasures and gets to exile another card from me. Takes my Ad Nauseam, chooses not to play it, plays Idol of Oblivion and draws a card. Kind of glad to see that choice. I draw Skull Clamp. So I float a mana. I could finally get Soul Ring, but remember I can't really play my commander here, so I'm gonna Soul Ring into Honorworn Shaku into Skull Clamp. Then I decide, you know what I'm gonna do? Actually, I'm gonna untap Shaku, clamp Rog. Finally find some mana for the game. Replay Rog off the Lotus and pass for the turn. Still no black though. My opponent plays Laelia and Curse of Opulence. I redirect the Curse of Opulence to themselves, so now whenever I attack them, I'll get a gold token rather than them getting one from me. But still, they swing in. Now they exile 2 cards, one from me, one from them. They hit a Magda. It's getting real hard to keep track. So they get a Magda from them and a Wooded Foothills from me, and they get multiple treasures. And Flame Slash my guy. I kind of wish I had my redirect spell now. And then they play their Magda. This is just getting absolutely ridiculous, right? I'm in so much trouble, and I finally draw a black source. Pretty much the last chance I had to find one. And instead of playing Toxic Deluge, I actually Chaos Defiler away my opponent's commander and get a blocker into play that I can start producing mana with using Curse. My opponent plays Gut, True Soul, Zealot, swings in with their 2/2, gets a token, and then makes another creature, and of course draws a card off their idol. But now I get to clamp, Calling the Weak my guy. I don't swing because I was worried they might block. Ritual. Chaos Defiler kills their flute. I Tevish. Sorry, this kind of got a little bit insane. So, what do we do? Play. I'm gonna pause. Can we pause? Play. I don't know why it played at turbo speed. The game used to the replay used to be a little bit slower, and you could follow it. It's like ultra fast now, and I can't even tell what's going on half the time. I play Dust Bowl, and I'd use Dust Bowl to clamp my Chaos Defiler. I fetch for a basic swamp. I get basic lands because I'm worried about Blood Moon. Okay. At this point, my opponent has a bunch of stuff in play. I don't swing with the Chaos Defiler because I don't want them to, even though I want the gold token, I don't want them to block and mess my play up. So instead, I attack with the Chaos Defiler, and then I Calling the Weak. I don't attack with it. I Calling the Weak it. I would have took the risk if I needed more mana, though. But I don't. So I Calling the Weak it, which then allows me to kill the Disruptor Flute and gives me 4 black. I remember the Dust Bowl's tap. So I have 4 black, 1 red, so that's 5, 6, 7, right? And I untap the Shaku with Tevish. Or, excuse me, 6, 7. Sorry. I cast Tevish, untap the Shaku with Tevish. So now I have 7 minus 5 plus 1. So I have 3 left. Play Guild Artisan. Untap the Shaku with Guild Artisan. Guild Artisan is a legendary enchantment. That means it untaps Shaku, and so this acts as a 2-mana tap for 1 colorless mana rock, basically, with some other text on it. And then, so I'm missing a colorless in here somewhere. Oh, I tap the Shaku initially, untap it, tap it, untap it, tap it, and then with the last black floating, I deluge for 3. So basically, Calling the Weak clears the flute. We play Tevish. We play Guild Artisan. Tap untap, tap untap. We deluge away the board. Then make a couple of dorks, and then pass for the turn. My opponent, for their turn, plays a 4-mana 5/2 that makes them the Monarch, and they draw a card. And then for my turn, I clamp. My opponent Pyrokinesis is in response, so I don't get the cards. So I go ahead and make Tevish dorks. And then I Shaku using the Guild Artisan. Clamp again. I don't like that my opponent's the Monarch and I don't have a way to attack here, and I can't get any gold tokens, but I find a Lelia off the top, so I feed the Swarm their guy, play the Lelia, swing in. I'm going to get a card. I haven't played a land yet. I'm going to get a card off the top. I'm going to get a gold token. I'm going to get the Monarch, and finally, I'm going to get my opponent to concede because they scoop it up. But if I don't hit a land with Lelia there, I'll just play the Workshop into Springleaf Drum, and then I'll use Drum, Dust Bowl. I'll use the Drum. I'll drum the Thrall token and use the Dust Bowl to cast into the fire something on their turn if I need to. Plus, I'll have the token from the Opulence, so I also have the option to Opposition Agent them, which will of course prevent them from searching for Mirza Saga in 2 turns. So that'll give me that option, and then shortly. At this point, basically, I've taken over the game, and don't forget I have the Monarch too. And so that was just an amazing game if you consider how far behind I was. And of course, if my opponent had artifact removal instead of like Disruptor Flute, I would have been in big trouble. The order of cards that they happened to draw lined up with mine could have been easily game over, and many times would have been game over. But this deck is just super resilient and managed to eke my way out of that. Finally, I mentioned I would talk about Breya here. For those of you not interested, of course, you can. That's the end of the Tevish Zot material. But so this is kind of my take on Breya. If Breya was something I was going to play in the modern era, it's got all the commander stuff going in it. It's got Psychic Frog. It's got a ton of mana and mana ramp. Lots of removal. Good counter magic. It's very disruptive. It's got the Winter Orb Urza thing happening. Takes advantage of the commander with Skull Clamp, and also has other ways to defeat it, like Duretti. But there's a number of reasons why this just isn't that good. And the first one is Breya doesn't actually inherently provide you any card advantage. And back in the day, when Breya was good, almost no commanders that were affordable provided any realistically like meaningful card advantage, except for one. And there were a lot of cries to have him banned at that time. People might not remember. That was Edric. So Edric was the only commander, and I have videos about that commander in my channel, that really provided a glut of card advantage in the same way that Bullszat does back in the day. That was affordable. And so we actually had to play fair games where our deck provided the card advantage. Our commanders either provided like a combo for us, or just some sort of pressure, or provided like a little card advantage. Like, maybe your commander would let you draw a card or something like that, or slowly, like 4 mana, activate your commander, draw a single card. Like, it would provide cards over time. But our commanders weren't, except for Edric, our commanders weren't typically just refilling our hand just by playing them. And so Edric became the hated commander of the day, and Breya was very, very good because most of the commanders had to come down and then had some sort of, like, if you compare Breya to Zur, for example, Zur was a commander that could attack and put Necropotence into play and cost 4 mana, or Kess that could replay things from the graveyard. Both of these commanders could provide tons of card advantage. However, they were 4 mana, they were summoning sick. While Kess could provide a card from the graveyard, it only gave you 1 card per turn, so like 1 on your turn, 1 on their turn. And you had to have the mana to play those cards. It didn't just like produce cards in your hand instantly for no mana. And Zur, while it did do that, if it attacked, because it'd go get Necro and then you would just refill your hand and win the game, it had to attack. And what that meant was that Breya was a great foil for the commanders of the day, because it could be a control commander that was controlling the thing you needed to control, which was their ability to replay their commander. You could replay yours, and so you could force the game to not be about the commanders and force the game to be about the decks. And so Breya was the, let's take commanders out of the commander deck and let's see whose deck is better deck. And that's why it was my favorite deck for a very long time, because I got to beat my opponent with the quality of my deck rather than the quality of my commander, which I thought was really cool. Ironically, using the quality of my commander, but it was used as a counter to theirs. It also, of course, came with some life gain to help with long games, which, Control always appreciates. But Breya is just not good anymore, because now you've got Minskinvu, Bullszat, and a whole host of Nadu and a bunch of other stuff that's in the command zone that just can almost instantly win the game. It comes down and just refills your hand super, super fast. Way scary. Just playing them often is enough. And Breya can't keep up with that. Breya is not for that world. It is not the solution to those threats. And if Breya isn't the solution, then Breya isn't the commander you want to be playing, and it really isn't. In addition to that, it has another problem, a huge problem actually, and that problem, two really. The two problems are the cards that they printed to make commanders good don't make Breya good. And what do I mean by that? Well, Deadly Rollick, Fierce Guardianship, and Deflecting Swat are all cards that want you to have your commander in play to reward you. But it's very difficult and slow to get a 4 casting cost commander into play that can't capitalize on the power of like Mana Vault and Soul Ring the way that you saw Bullszat do. You can't Dark Ritual this thing out, right? So you have to actually like get it into play the fair way. You have to pay 4 mana for your 4 mana commander, and that's not great in a format where most people aren't doing that. Most people are turboing their commanders out super, super fast. Their guy is cradling their Nadu out and paying for most of the cost that way or whatever. So Breya just can't take advantage of any of that. And like I said, the commander cards don't really become awesome until your commander's in play. But also, Breya really likes to sacrifice itself. It uses the ability that it can be replayed from the command zone to kill itself. I'm really sorry about the weed eating going on out here. It kills itself. It then replays itself, and then because you sacrifice one of the 1/1 flyers in Breya, and then you replay it, and you've got that ability. It's a recurring removal. Because Breya likes to kill itself, it doesn't really play too friendly with these cards. You still run them because they're just way too good not to play, but that interaction kind of is a problem. And then finally, you have a card like it's not even in my deck. Jeweled Lotus. Jeweled Lotus made Breya worse. If Soul Ring makes Breya worse, and it does, because it can't really capitalize on Soul Ring until you get to the point where it's in play, and then you can use it to pay for activation costs. But Jeweled Lotus makes Breya much worse, because Jeweled Lotus is the equivalent of a frickin' Lotus Petal for Breya, other than when you're paying commander tax. But it doesn't pay for three of the 4 parts of the card. It pays for 1. Oh my goodness, the weeding! I'm actually tempted to go tell him to stop. I apologize if this is getting real loud for you guys. I'm going to wrap this up here because of the noise that's going on in the background. But that's the bottom line. No card advantage. It doesn't provide mana. It doesn't solve any of the problems that we really face in the format well. It's too slow to get into play. The card's just not good. So if you play this deck, what you're playing is a deck with no commander, basically. And that's just not going to cut it in today's format. Anyway, that's all I've got. Hopefully you enjoyed watching. I will say thank you very much. I got to go deal with this weed eating noise, and we're going to have to cut it here. See you next time.